Transportation and Climate Initiative, which we think, and the governor thinks is the most effective and exciting way that we can drive down emissions in the transportation sector. Terry Gray, who's the Deputy Director at DEM, is leading a cross-agency team that's engaged with other state teams, and he will tell us more.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. As Janet said, I'm here this morning to talk a little bit about the Transportation and Climate Initiative. This is moving very quickly, and it's we'll talk real sort of at a high level at this point about what we mean by TCI and what it's going to involve going forward. Just to build off a little bit about what Allison had in the last presentation, it's pretty clear we need to focus on transportation. 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from that sector. Rhode Island is a regional leader in this. We're on track to meet our greenhouse gas goals, but reduction goals, but if we really need to keep on track, we're going to have to do something with transportation. We have a lot going on. A lot of the different agencies in this room have a lot of investments and activities going on with respect to reducing emissions in transportation right now. We have the VW settlement money that's out there. It's being invested in a lot of creative ways, a lot of effective ways across the state. Certainly RIPTA's doing a lot of work with the electric bus pilot, and that'll continue. There's a lot of work going on with OER and other agencies about promoting electronic vehicles or electric vehicles and the charging station infrastructure. We need to get a little bit more active with respect to regional rail, and you'll probably see the little shuttle that's running around outside, the autonomous vehicle shuttle, and that's also kind of a really interesting neat pilot on what we can do to reduce some of our emissions in this sector. TCI is actually a regional collaboration of 12 states. It's actually 13 government entities. It includes 12 states and the District of Columbia. And we have gotten together to look regionally at this problem. And the goal of the TCI effort is to create a regional cap and invest program that will have carbon allowances that will be auctioned off based on the emissions from different fuels that are burned in the transportation sector. The way we'll design the system is to cap the total emissions from that sector, and then there'll be a slow reduction, predictable reduction over time in that cap that will allow the states and DC to meet our regional greenhouse gas reduction goals. One of the key things is, as the allowances are auctioned off, the proceeds from those auctions will then be reinvested in or invested in different things to support further reduction in the sector. So all those things I just talked about with respect to electric buses, EV infrastructure, and other transportation benefits would be considered as areas for investment with the money that will be created or brought in from these auctions. We will be responsible, being we, Rhode Island, will be responsible for coming up with our own investment plan. This won't be dictated by the regional group. We will have the opportunity to really see what fits for us and where the best use of that money will be directed. This probably sounds, sounds really familiar. It's being based on the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI. This is a proof of concept and a pretty robust program now that's been around for quite a while. It does the same thing in the electric generating sector, where carbon allowances are auctioned off quarterly for electric generating units, and then the money from those auctions is reinvested into demand reduction. So this started in Rhode Island a while ago. In April of 2018, we held 2 listening sessions in the state, and so stakeholder input. Again, this was very conceptual at this point. Nobody really kind of understood exactly what the scope of what was being talked about. But some of the takeaways really were stakeholders really wanted to see us look at changes to vehicles, fuels, and land use. Those were 3 things where you could really get some benefit in terms of emissions reduction from this sector. There was also a clear message that we need to think big and think regionally, hence the 13 governments that are involved in the TCI development process right now. In December of last year, TCI issued a statement endorsed by a number of states, including us. And the statement committed that we would design this system over the next year. And we would cap and reduce the emissions. The policy, again, would be to allow each participating government to direct how the proceeds from the program would be invested to meet their particular needs and goals. And it's really designed to be an open and transparent process as we develop the program. This is the setup that the TCI is being developed under. It's being facilitated by the Georgetown Climate Center. They've been doing a lot of the logistical support, a lot of the organization and facilitation, and that's been pretty invaluable to making this move forward. There's a TCI leadership team. I'm on that. Director Coit is on that. Rosemary Powers is on that for representing the state of Rhode Island. There's a executive policy committee that really sort of coordinates all the technical work done in these work groups and tees up decisions for the leadership team. So Allison and I have been representing Rhode Island along with Jonathan Schreck from DPUC on the executive policy committee. And then there's all these different work groups, outreach and communications, investment and equity, as well as technical analysis. And there are representatives from DEM, DOT, DPUC, RIPTA, statewide planning. There's a bunch of different organizations, I'm probably forgetting some, but there's a bunch of organizations in Rhode Island state government that are all hooked into this and are feeding into the development of the program. These are some of the principles that are out there, sort of the guiding principles on what we want the program to look like when we're done. Obviously, we want to see the carbon reduction goals are met. We want to create opportunities for jobs and economic growth. This has been a big offshoot of the RGGI investments. As Carol will tell you, there's a lot of jobs that have been created in that sector. We want to see the same opportunities created in the transportation sector, hopefully with the same results. And the other thing that's really key is we want to ensure that the benefits and the burdens of the pricing and the investments are shared equitably across all our communities in the state. A lot of the communities that we have different needs. They have different focus areas. We need to make sure we have a very fair and reasonable investment strategy that meets all those needs as we go forward here. Some of the other principles that we're looking at, we want to actually improve the transportation system in terms of resiliency. Right? Some of this money is going to go into things like congestion mitigation and improving infrastructure, hopefully, and that will also lead to better traffic flow and decrease of emissions until we get to the real benefits of electric vehicles on a broad scale. We want to engage a lot of stakeholders, and as you can see, we really want this kind of quadruple win here of environmental, economic, social, and public health benefits. These are two of the decisions that have been made by the leadership team already that are pretty critical. One is to figure out what kind of fuels will be covered, and it's pretty simple. 80% of the emissions come from gasoline and diesel, on-road diesel, so those are the two fuels that the program is focused on right now. About 13% of the emissions come from jet fuels. Jet fuel is not being modeled right now, but we're considering that they may be added along with other fuels on a state-by-state basis as the program sort of matures or evolves over time. Another big decision is the point of regulation. And we've looked at this, again, this is all 13 government entities that looked at this collectively, and a decision was made to focus on something called the prime suppliers. These are the people that bring the fuels into the region, into Providence, into New Haven, into Boston, and look at them as the point of regulation for the program. They will be the ones that will be required to purchase the offsets for the fuels that they manage. The logistics of this are all being worked on right now. The prime suppliers are engaged in that dialogue, so it's something that's being developed as we speak. The major reason for looking at these guys as the point of regulation is it's a pretty finite universe. So, for instance, if you look at retail supply for fuels, how many gas stations are out there in this region? It would be really kind of difficult to regulate at that The other thing is these entities already report to, they report on that flow through. So to the degree that we can get access to that, we don't have to create another duplicative reporting process to collect data on compliance. This is a high-level timeline for TCI development, and like I said earlier, it's moving very quickly. By the end of this year, we want to have a complete framework for a program that all the states can get behind and release to the public. We're going to have to come back and look at how we need to adjust our authorities and our regulations in order to implement that policy proposal. And we won't be alone. All the other states will be looking at what they need for enabling legislation to make this happen. Once that happens, and maybe this is a little optimistic, but this is what we're shooting for right now. Once that happens, we're going to start the market, develop the market, and hopefully by the end of 2022, revenue will start to be generated and allocated to the states and come back in to be invested in further improvements. In terms of 2019, this is how things are going to play out, and they are moving very quickly. As those of us that are involved know, there's at least one, probably 2 conference calls a week on this. There's an awful lot of documents floating around constantly at different levels. There is also a series of policy meetings, publicly available work groups, publicly available webinars, and other engagement opportunities that are happening at a very fast pace. Generally, it's been broken into 4 phases by quarters, with the culmination of release of the policy proposal in December. A lot of the work being done right now is very preliminary, kind of at this level that I'm talking about. This summer is really going to be dedicated to this modeling and policy analysis, which will be really critical. And when we come out of that, we're going to really have an idea of what the benefits could be, what the potential economic impacts, both pro and con, could be from the program, and then we'll be able to really start to dig into the specifics of creating it. We're looking at probably at a public engagement process in the state of Rhode Island, starting probably after Labor Day, right in the fall, when we have a little bit more detail on what this is going to mean in our market. These are some of the key policy considerations that went into this and continue to go into this. It's really a leadership opportunity for Rhode Island. You know, we're a tiny state, but we can have a big voice in this process, and we are trying to do that. There's economic impacts, both pro and con, for implementing this. There will probably be a small impact on the price of fuels, but as with Reggie, there will be a positive economic impact from the investment of the proceeds of the auctions back into the state. These are some of the potential investments that I mentioned earlier: increased infrastructure for charging, improved public transportation, congestion mitigation, credits for EV purchases, alternative transportation options such as walkways and bike paths, as well as land use planning for decreasing sprawl. So that's why all those agencies are engaged in this issue. We also have to think about the transition of transportation funding. As a lot of you know, the Department of Transportation is heavily reliant on the gas tax. As we meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals, gasoline is going to go away. So there's a transition that has to go on there, and that has to be carefully thought through, not just in Rhode Island, but within all the jurisdictions that are involved in this. We need to keep this in mind, the equity considerations. We need to make sure that we're fair and reasonable to all our communities as we roll this out. And that's it. These are some of our success stories right now. So, I guess.
Thank you, Terry. I want to I want to have any questions and comments from the EC4 council members. And then while we'll have some public comment at the end, I just thought while Terry was up here, we would take a few minutes for any questions or comments from anyone. I just want to emphasize a few things. First, Governor Raimondo is on board and working with fellow governors. This is bipartisan. One of the things that makes this exciting and an antidote to what's going on at the national level is we have Governor Baker, Governor Raimondo, Governor Hogan, bipartisan effort, and the governor is committed to this. Secondly, Terry mentioned some of the equity issues. There is a meeting today in Newark that a number of folks are attending. It's a TCI equity workshop. That's something we're going to be talking a lot more about. The meeting in Boston a couple weeks ago was open to the public. That meeting's open to the public. So there's an effort right now that's largely at a regional level as we try to work together with states and make sure everyone's holding hands and doing this together. But we'll bring it back for a lot of intensive discussions in Rhode Island. And if we're to meet that schedule, and many of us were involved in Reggie, we know that we have a lot of work to do at the state level to engage people, including legislators, and to bring this successfully through our General Assembly and our process. So you can't underemphasize how much we have to do still at the state level, but I think trying to get some of these mechanics together at a regional level so that the states don't fracture is critical to the success overall. So just wanted to add those comments and open it up for any comments or questions from the council members first.
Terry. So the implementation of this obviously relies on all of these states that are cooperating in this effort to concurrently pass legislation in their respective states. Is your group working on a template for legislation that each state will use so that, the legislation will mirror one another?
Yes.
Throughout?
Yeah, that's how things split out in the initial days of Revy. The same exact thing. It was a template, and then states were allowed to could tailor that, but there was a certain amount of regional consistency that had to happen in order to support the market. So there will be a template, and then we'll probably tweak that template a little bit to meet our needs. There's also a dialogue going on with respect to when do you reach the critical mass to support a market within the region. So some of these states have different legislative processes than we do. Some may be faster, some may be very much slower. So you need to reach that critical mass, or else it's not really a market. If it's us, Vermont, and Delaware, right, it's not really going to work.
Right.
You need some of the big players at the table to make
So
that.
I'm assuming, based on your comments about rolling this out in the fall, you want to start educating the public and the legislators if you're teeing this up for next legislative session starting next January.
Right. That's going to definitely be part of our
That'll be here
communications plan.
like that.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Thanks,
you.
Jan.
Yeah.
Meredith has been very, very involved in this since its inception.
First at DOT and now it's statewide
Yeah.
funding, and I think it's really starting to come together. The teams, as they're set up on the different subcommittees, there's a lot of work going on between, so for example, there'll be a call with both equity and investment group along with the communications group coming up. So there are a lot of the different groups are working very well together. And we need to know what the programs will look like first, so to speak, to Jim's point. That you can't quite roll out a draft on the legislation until you know what the program will look like. There will be some point somewhere in the fall where you get to the point where you have a sense of what the program is going to look like, and that turns into the draft legislation.
I wanted to, Rosemary Powers, the Deputy Chief of Staff for the Governor, is trying to get to these meetings. I know you've been out to a few of them. I just wanted to offer you a chance, Rosemary, to say anything if you care to.
Well, thank you, Janet. Thank you, everyone. Happy to be here. Really excited about TCI. Terry has been doing a great job kind of shepherding our team together. I also want to call out Jacqueline Porfilio, though, too, who is a policy analyst in the governor's office. I think most of you have interacted with her. She's been doing a wonderful job, too, supporting our work. But I think what you see through TCI, and also with that slide that was up at the beginning, is that we are really breaking down silos under Governor Raimondo's direction, working cross-agency, bringing folks together, really focusing on the climate work that we need, that we all know that we need to do, trying to identify those places where we, as a smallish state, can make some good progress. So, I'm excited about TCI. We had a great meeting up in Boston a couple of weeks ago. There's more to come on that, and I don't you know better than I do how difficult it might be and the challenges we might have in trying to design legislation that we can then successfully move through the assembly next year. We'll really need everyone's help on that, no doubt. But again, just thank you all for coming, and thank you for being here, and thank you to Terry for this TCI work, and Allison too, who did every time I see these presentations, I learn more, so they're really helpful for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to add one thing before I sit down, like Janet said, there's a lot of public engagement going on in the formation of this program. There was a meeting, a big workshop in Boston that had pretty wide attendance. Hank was there. There were a couple other people there. There was a meeting in Newark today on equity and investment. There's going to be a webinar tentatively scheduled for next week to talk about the reference cases and some of the models. So if you're into that, all of these will be publicly available. That commitment to transparency is real across this region. We really want a lot of broad input. And we're going to pump out the notices for those public opportunities to comment and weigh in through the EC4 mailing list. So you should hopefully get notice of those. It's moving fast, so don't expect a lot of notice, but we will try and get the word out. So,
Terry, before you sit down, I just want to give 5 minutes for any other comments or questions. I see a couple hands up. Just identify who you are for everyone.
Timmons Roberts, I'm at Brown University Climate Development Lab and State Big Mouth on climate change. I want to express sincere appreciation for the state and the governor's office and the agencies moving on to TCI. It's a big deal. And I know it's still uncertain, so I want to express also some hope for it. I'm worried about, as I of course would be, about the level of stringency in the cap. Right, on the investment side, RGGI has been very successful. It's raised billions of dollars for energy efficiency projects and other investments around the state and around the region. But on the cap side, we're not certain if the emissions reductions that have happened in the electricity sector were due to RGGI or due to the RES, the renewable energy standards, or due to the advent of fracking and the cheap natural gas that drove down the price on gas and drove coal out of and oil out of our Northeast generating system. Does that make sense? So what I'm worried about is, we're stuck at $6 a ton, under $6 of the RGGI allowances for emissions per carbon dioxide ton, and that's not necessarily driving much emissions reductions. While that sector is decarbonized, anyway, I'm worried that.
So if I might offer, Ken Kimmel from the Union of Concerned Scientists, who used to be one of the state agency heads who worked on RGGI, he made that point at a meeting in Boston, saying he feels like the caps have always been set too high.
Right.
So that was something that.
Yeah. So I guess this is a little pep talk to Rhode Island to exert its leadership, which I appreciated as a top of one of your slides, and demand a strong cap. I mean, again, the 80% by 2050 target is based on 20-year-old science. And the science now is much more urgent, and we have not acted for those 20 years in the nanometer, so we have to act much faster. The IPCC report, the National Climate Assessment, and so on. So just to say, let's make sure we get a good cap so this thing really is worth all this effort, because it's an important effort. And I think it's a great system to have each of the states sort of holding hands, jumping into the pool together, because each of these are sort of just state systems collecting money and then distributing that money, but making sure that they have a consistent price across them. So thanks.
The debate on the cap is probably going to happen in September. That's the way it's sort of slated out as on the cap.
Do you know how that's going to happen?
It's all going to depend on the modeling runs. There's 5 models that all interact and feed into each other. Like I said, there's going to be a webinar next week about the reference cases on those models, and then they're going to chug away and come up with the results, do the analysis on it, and then that'll be presented through that hierarchy that I brought on the board.
I'm Steve Dodge, I'm on the Petroleum Council, and we represent a lot of the prime suppliers. And you're right, Terry, we have been engaged in both at the Georgetown level, and we had a series of meetings with some Massachusetts folks a couple weeks ago. We just want to extend the same offer to you folks as well. Obviously, we're the folks that have to implement the program, and so we're happy to share our experiences. I just want to make one observation, and Terry, I don't know whether you can comment or not, but I'm glad you brought it up, and that's the transition of transportation funding and that whole issue. I've been following this for a number of years, and my understanding is when this concept was originally adopted, the proceeds were not intended to be used for lack of a better word, potholes. I think an analogy may be Ridgey wasn't designed to build electric power lines. And so I know over the past year or so, there's been a growing focus on using Ridgey funds, this proposal, cap and investment proposal for transportation, for potholes, and for lack of a better term, transportation infrastructure. So there was a lot of focus on that in the Boston session a couple of weeks ago. And again, I don't know if you can comment on that, and I don't know what our position, if we even have a position on it, but it's been kind of an interesting development over the past year or so.
I think so far all the conversations that I've heard related to investment in any kind of transportation infrastructure always have to be grounded in the emissions reductions. So it would really kind of come out in terms of congestion mitigation, not repairs and maintenance, that kind of stuff. So at least that's what I've heard so far.
And the governor is very interested in improving regional rail and in public transit. So just to echo what Terry's saying, but those are really important conversations that are going to be held at a state level, as well as probably the template will give some kind of advice to states on how best to invest based on the model part. Lily? Talk loudly.
Sorry. Is it your sense that the legislation would be standardized in terms of the capping piece, but more open in terms of where the investments would go?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I remember hearing a comment on one of them about investments in broadband, just far from potholes, and so is it allowed to be wide open so that every state can have the best chance of passing, or do you think there's going to be some coalescence?
I don't think there's going to be any template imposed on the investment plans. That's been a pretty consistent point all the way through. Now, with Reggie, we have a process to develop the investment plan that OER follows. It's not mandated, but there's some parameters on that. Maybe that's the model that we end up with in TCI, but it's still really early on that.
But under Reggie, the statute at the state level mandates the proceeds go back into reducing emissions from the electric sector. And the whole point of this is to invest the emissions back in things that reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector. So I think that would be a statutory, hopefully, enshrined aspect of our program.
Janet?
Yes.
Hi. Jim Salenza from Rhode. I have two quick questions. One is in terms of targeted fuels. Is fuel used in the water transportation also captured in that?
It all depends on whether it falls into those categories that I talked about. Most of it's on-road diesel, and it's related to the reporting structures that we already have. We want to piggyback on those existing reporting structures. So if that diesel ends up in a marine environment for that use, then that would probably be captured in the program. There might be other fuels that are not, like the aviation fuels.
Right, yeah, so you exempted aviation, so I just wanted to return the increasing amount of shipping and transportation, in all those states, it's a substantial portion of, I think, the emissions. The second issue is, I think in terms of using the use of wordage, the classic studies done by Dr. Jackson in the 60s from CDC, which transformed our thinking about transportation as a public health issue. The term was used was built environment. So I think the term sprawl has a less richer connotation. I think the term built environment connects to things like people's access to good food, recreation and activity, physical motion, and I also think it better captures the equity and class issues that are embedded in the whole conversation. So I think in terms of reducing it, the sprawl has a very minimalistic approach. And I just want to suggest that you can enrich the conversation by going back to the traditional term, which is common in the public health community. That is, it's the built environment, which is, our built environment is completely, obsessed with single vehicle movement. The built environment needs to change in order for us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, not just limiting sprawl.
Hey, Jim.
Good point.
I'm going to cut this off now so that we get through the other presentations, but stand by
Thank you.
because there might be more questions or comments here.
Thanks.